you've been such a huge, well, remain and are and will be for some time, I'm sure, such a significant figure in our red meat industry. What gives you the passion around red meat?
I guess it's not just about red meat. We've got to understand red meat is just the end of the supply chain. It actually starts with a live animal, which ideally they all start in a paddock somewhere. Effectively, they start as a little bit of a gene. So the whole part of, Ben, I'm in the food industry, which is, I guess, meat and livestock related. But it's an irony, and since I've retired, I've got a little farm north of Brisbane. But I still can't believe how much I smile when I see a new calf born. It's just something, for some reason, that can't say it's more special than my kids because I'm being taped. But there's something about a newborn calf that really think, I bought this in the world, it's really good. So there's that. So in farming and just A, the lifestyle, B, the people, and that's just not the people doing it, it's the people that congregate around the world of agriculture and food. And, you know, from the processing side, well, that's really just being a good factory. That's being a converter. Efficiency, technology, stainless steel, flashing lights, and then creating the sizzle and hopefully shaping the consumer to want your product. But if you've had the newborn calf born, you can create a lot more sizzle with the person who's going to sit down and eat that, you know, medium rare tenderloin today. So it's a whole of chain system, Ben, and I guess I've been lucky because not many meat people start as farmers. And my origin is, you know, humble son of a poor dairy farmer. People say probably not, or maybe just the poor son of a humble dairy farmer. But so that's where it is, and not many people actually migrate through to having beef in a box or beef in a foam tray on Coles or Woolworths from that. So it's just, the love of the whole chain.
And just while we're on that chain, tell us a little bit about the ACC business and your role there.
Okay, so ACC is a private family company, Queensland, started in 1958. Father and son team started with a feedlot in Roma only because they actually won a supply contract, hit a drought. How do you meet the commitments to supply cattle if you don't have some form of controlled feeding? The other thing is they weren't from the land, the family, and they just couldn't believe how much time was wasted about talking about weather when you actually couldn't do anything about it. So the only way, therefore, was to control production, was have controlled production. So I was lucky enough to join the company in 1998, and we had 2 farms, 3,000 cattle on feed, and 110 employees. I guess when I walked out the door full-time 2 years ago, we had 42 farms, 300,000 cattle, 1,600 staff, and produced a carton of meat every 3 seconds. It wasn't a bad transformation across there. It is still proudly family owned. We're back now. My successor was the eldest son of the founder. So it's a good story, Ben. I enjoyed it because we partnered with a major retailer at the time, and that gave our banks the confidence to support us to grow at the rate our customer wanted. So we actually were never speculating because we had targets of what we could get to. In the end, it didn't go so well because we got to 83% of national supply, and that removed too much flexibility from the supply chain. So we had a reset from that point, but great family company, still in it, but farmers first. Meat's just an outcome of the farm business.
And I think with that insight, Dave, there's going to be some. With that experience, you're going to be able to give us some really interesting insight. The beef industry, or the red meat industry, over the last couple of years in particular, has gone through some pretty tumultuous times. We had a weather forecaster come out and get things wrong. We've had a whole range of biosecurity challenges. We've got a consumer who's more focused on what we do than they ever have in the past. We're being asked to look at all sorts of things in relation to how we manage our natural capital and emissions and all those sorts of things. If you sort of look back over that, say that last 12 or 18 months, what could we have done better?
I'm glad you raised the first one, and I raised it at a forum the other week. I've never ever run my farm business or the company I'm in based on a weather forecast. And I really do not know why last year the farm sector chose to agree that it was going to be dry before it was dry. And they behaved that way. And I spoke to a man, an 80-year-old man who's been in the industry all his life, hugely successful cattle, and a few other people. Nobody can remember ever the behaviour of a farming sector to respond to a forecast. I mean, we never believe it at the best of times. It's a guide. It's a rough guide. I mean, in Melbourne, you get it right once out of the 4 times a day it changes. But the challenge is, and there was people in a sector selling to people in a sector who were trying to sell, who could only end up in tragedy. So I really, and then they all look for somebody to blame. And it really is, I just haven't experienced that. But there's a reset, there's great grass. And that was also compounded, Ben, if we go back 3 years prior to that, with coming out of the 2018 drought, which is debilitating across the entire East Coast. When I had 42 drought-declared cattle stations from Mount Isa through to southern New South Wales. It wasn't fun. So we all sold off our cattle. It then rained, we come into 3 La Niñas, and we all went crazy on cattle, as though they were going out of fashion. People who'd suffered with their breeding herds through the drought didn't replace with the breeders. They went back into by trading cattle because they'd be easy to look after in drought. So we actually built this momentum in the cattle market that was totally unrelated to what the end motive was, which was meat. And a classic case is the highest price in meat at the time would have been a Coles or Woolworths contract. Over the hooks, carcass, $9.30. Unheard of prices. But that actually equals $5.10 live. There wasn't an animal sold in Australia for under $5.10 live. People paying $7, $8, $9 and $10 had to have them, as though there was going to be a shortage in the rebuild. That then became the compounding fact. It was dry, had to get rid of, we're going to lose money on it. So it was a really, really strange circumstance that went through, and I haven't experienced before, and I think there's probably bankers in the room that have lived this through with their clients to work out how, why, and to nurse through. So that was a really telling point. But it is supply-demand, but in the end, we are a net exporter. 72% of everything we process has to leave our shore and compete against the big end of town in meat world. So what happens here at home is really is a farmer-to-farmer market. They're the owners that set their rules, but the meat processor can only pay equivalent to world market price when he wishes to buy it back off you. That's a long-winded way on one point, mate. But if you come back to biosecurity, that's probably the lumpy skin threat out of Indonesia was really good in terms it got every national TV. It was on Sunrise, it was on the Today Show, etc., etc. It hasn't been on the front page of a paper for a year. The threat is no less. And what hasn't picked up is, and it's only just being picked up now, it's not just the beef and the sheep industry, it's the dairy industry. It's anything to do with the animal industry is affected because we lose our right to export. Every piece of agricultural produce that leaves this country has a health certificate from the federal government. Bottom left-hand corner is a seal that says free from. And that free from indicates all the diseases this country is free from. The minute we're not, the government cannot issue a health certificate to allow export. So if you can imagine if 70% of the Australian beef industry has to stay at home, the meat industry has to stay at home. This is the perfect opportunity for every trading importer to reset the rules. Because we've been keeping them at bay for 50 years based on our biosecurity. Well, we can't have your product in there, could threaten our industry. So they are unlikely to want to have just open the doors back up. We'll be back renegotiating everything we've fought for over the last 50 years. So Ben, the threat, whilst I say the threat hasn't diminished, it's also, foot and mouth's been around the world, in all our major countries for 100 years, it's not here. So part of that is the protection because most of our threats and risk will come in via Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane airports. Not many of those people walk out of the airport, jump in the car and go and land on your farm. They'll generally stay in town. So the life cycle of that virus is about 48 hours. So if you can keep them away and keep them away from getting into the peri-urban, then we're okay. And that's why we haven't got it. So our measures are in place. So I'm not here to frighten you, but what I'm saying, the risk hasn't changed. It hasn't gone away, but being in Indonesia is terribly, terribly close to us in terms of for things that, like the chicken is now, chicken's virus has come through wild birds. Now, this lumpy skin won't travel by a wild bird, but it can come by biting insect. Sorry, mate. What was your other points? You had 3.
No. Look, I think that's a really interesting insight. And look, yeah, the red meat market is a real, it's been forever, and I'm interested in whether you think it'll ever change. But it's been a real boom and bust sort of relationship with the processor. So how is that relationship unfolding in your view, and what are the things that the processor's going to face over the next little while?
Yeah, I guess I've got terribly rose-coloured glasses because I've only come from being a supply chain advocate. So if you want to be a spot seller, then you'll take a spot market. Up to you. You can guess a forecast or you can guess the market. Processors have unbelievable, incredible amount of capital tied up in a brick box with a lot of stainless steel inside, that if it can't run at 90% of efficiency, it will be ineffective and inefficient and be out of the money in terms of selling its product. So it wants to run full. It can't speculate on those cattle, but people who just want to sell the sale yards and hope it's good on the day, well, you actually get the hope it's good on the day price. But if you actually sat down, forecast out, a bit like you have to do in the fruit market, forecast out and went and sat with your processor, listen, I'm going to have 30 steers to turn off in first week of September. They'll actually love you for it. They're not going to lock it away and say, I'm not going to give you market, because you do the supply first and you do the market discovery in the week leading up to it if you want to. But he's got his factory full. You've now got your committed space to going there. So we don't work. There's no trust, which is quite ironical, because both needs each other. We're dependent on each other. But while you're not prepared to forecast or flag your supply to them, it's going to remain broken and disjointed. And they don't like sale yards. The cost of servicing out of a sale yard for a processor is, where the paperwork's going to be right, you actually don't know what the specification of the cattle is going to be right, the origin. So there's actually risk cost to them, and they buy it. So you get priced that way unless there's a shortage. Coles, who are the leaders in developing a supply chain, only came about because when they just used to buy cattle, get them killed, send aside to the stores. It happened to be in Victoria. They needed 41 cattle to fill the store's demand. The sale that day was at Pakenham. Everyone knows what Pakenham is. And they got there and there's only 8 eligible for them. So they actually had 14 stores open that did not have any beef for that week. That soon was a bell moment that we better change the processes to how we provide. And it's just really matured back down to specification, et cetera, from there on.
It is really interesting watching that relationship play out, and you sort of think it's almost like you just come in the room and sit down and talk to each other. We'd go a long way to solving some of that volatility. One of the things that we've seen a lot of recently, David, is the amount of information that is out there that is, I guess, critical of the red meat industry, in particular emissions and those sort of things. So, what's your view on how should industry be trying to correct that, and are we doing a good job?
Yeah, you can always do a better job at no matter what you do, even like this gig. But if you come back to, we keep forgetting our industry stood up 8 years ago and made an announcement about CN30, carbon neutral 30, well before anybody else had even thought about it. Now, I personally didn't agree with the decision. I thought it was ludicrous, but the difference is it put a line in the sand and deflected away from government having to make policy on your behalf, because it'll rarely be in your interest, but they were happy to make it on your behalf. But it actually just made an awareness across the group. Well, what we're all forgetting, and even industry and even our leaders, I mean, there are 15 key sustainability goals in the United Nations Sustainability Index. Numbers 1, 2 and 3 are only about food and people. Nothing about clean water, nothing about trees, nothing about blue oceans. It's reduced poverty, food security, health and well-being. But as food producers and fibre producers, we're being treated as though we're the bad guys in the equation. And we've not championing that it is our role to food and clothe what's going to be $9 billion. 9 billion people. So we're not championing what we are. We're giving space to the factions, the movements, the anti-animals. I mean, the one thing about methane is it's allowed the vegans to come out, which, as you all know, it's only one mouthful to convert back, so it's not an irreversible process. The anti-animal, the anti-killing brigade, the whole world. So we've lost out to that. But I think, Ben, you stop focusing on those. Focus on who are our mainstream people, and get them to understand all the carbon sequestration projects that are going around, Rio Tinto's, MEAG. What are they buying? They're buying farmland to sequester carbon. You can't do it in a brick. You can't do it in an asphalt road. You can't do it in an aeroplane. You need farmland to do it. So we are the solution, not the problem. Methane, short-lived gas, half-life 12 years. Half-life of 12 years. But we're being put out as we're the bad guys. CO2, transpiration, grows grass, turns into beef. Not a bad form of CO2 is our methane. But industry will fix it before any other industries, fossil fuels, construction, mining, resources, because all can only do is buy our offsets or insets that we produce. So I think we just be on the front foot, mate, be proud of what we do, but don't put our heads in the sand. We've done some terrible things over 150 years. We haven't been the most sustainable. But people tend to forget our land is our asset. Not many people wish to destroy the thing that generates their income from. Your other thing about animal welfare, we've all got better. We've had to. And even my learning on animal welfare was I had a brand new English-bred born head of QA for Coles while into the country. And our job was to take them out bush, as we call it. And we're going to show all animal husbandry practices of how good we are at it. And it didn't matter how many times I practiced dehorning or castration or fire branding, I couldn't work out how any of those practices would fit on the front page of the Women's Weekly and pass muster. So there's a change of process, and there are ways around it. You know, people were saying we can't afford anaesthetising the calves, or we can't afford local anaesthetic. In the end, it's $1 a calf, and if you don't want to protect your industry for $1 a calf, when that thing during the boom is worth $1,500, you've actually got your priorities wrong. Dehorning is easily cured. It's called buying pole bulls only. Now, probably a few Hereford people who don't like that, but the fact is there are ways to do it, and they don't do anything. I mean, you know, get a shotgun to fight off the dogs if that's why you got horns on your cows, right? Don't worry about it. All the excuses are wrong about why we need to have horns. And just while I am pissing people off, I just thought there's this. People keep asking about my thoughts on speckled parks. And I have a very standard, which is becoming quite boring, reply as to how many rooms in your house? Most people say 5 or 6. Well, you only need 5 or 6 floor rugs, so that's how many speckled parks you need. Because that's what they're best suited for. Now, their meat's fine, but their unique characteristic is the hide. That's what they bought on. They bought on the skin.
Next question.
Back on
Anyway,
topic.
one of the things that in your retirement, David, you've had some incredible exposure to other proteins. So, if I look through all the things that you do, it's a very protein-heavy schedule you've got. If you look at the oysters, seafood, dairy, are there things in those industries that they're doing that the red meat industry guys need to be picking up and running with?
A bit about your board papers are like a menu. That's what I like about my job at the moment. So I think across each of those sectors, you can be really harsh on how well your industry is doing, and we probably had a favourite crack at MLA just before lunch because they're the easiest ones to kick to death. But also by the same token, they have an AGM and there's a vote every year, and they're so bad that 2% of the people turn up to vote or choose to vote. So if you want change, you won't do it by participating at 2% level only. But if you think about where we are in relation to our other commodities on the menu, wine, bit over-indexed in China, what happened? Smashed. 2.5 years unsold wine sitting in storage in Australia now. Dairy, old now, but we had the melamine scare in China, which crucified the dairy industry, skim milk powder, which is quality, integrity. Seafood industry lost its capacity to provide origin and provenance. So we come down to now, so we live on, I think we sell 4 times the amount of skin on barramundi than we grow in Australia. It's a magic product. So it's lost its provenance. So grains are still a commodity that actually has to compete on a global market, but is totally reliant on global inputs in terms of fertiliser, chemical, fuel. So there's no real point of difference there. So at least with meat, we've created provenance. We have earned through systems and performance, probably the green and clean tag for the world. And we've got integrity in our systems, and the other thing of all those commodities, it still tastes the best. So, point of business. So I actually think red meat industries, and it counts for lamb as well, and who doesn't know the Sam Kekovich ad? Right? People who don't even lamb know the Sam Kekovich ad. But I think red meat can hold itself up there, Ben, against decommoditising and showing what the true characteristics are to achieve market sizzle.
So you take out of that that we're from a red meat industry point of view, we're actually doing pretty well within that protein space in terms of protecting our share and those sorts of things. I've got one more question before I hand over to the floor. Just so just the rules are that we're here to hear from David, so it must be a question. Please introduce yourself. We don't need any more statements. We've got our statement maker here today. So my last question for you, David, is you've sort of taken us on a bit of a journey as to all the way back to ACC and where the red meat market is and some of the challenges we've been through. What does it look like over the next sort of 12 and 24 months from both a domestic market point of view and an export market? I mean, there's lots of stuff that's happening in Asia in particular, and I know that's been a focus of yours over the years in terms of markets that you've been working on to develop access. So what does the market look like on those two fronts over the next sort of 12 and 24 months? Get your pens out, cattle producers. This will be worth its weight in gold.
No change? No. As I tried to explain earlier, hopefully, there are 2 distinct markets within our market. There's the farmer-traded market, which is effectively based on grass and rain. So you either carry extra numbers if you've got grass, you buy extra numbers if you've got grass, you retain extra free miles if you've got grass. If you haven't, you sell. The meat market, we're actually out there, and it's really driven, and there are far better experts in this room here who've come along to throw tomatoes at me in terms of understanding the dynamics of the supply. Whilst we are 70% export out of this country, we're basically 2% of the global market. So we are totally at the whim of others. So this massive herd, and I'll digress for a minute, if I can. And Johnny Martin, it's only stats, and we know what you can do with stats. But we talk about the US, and Connor and Matt live and breathe and know what the US is. But to the end of September, Australia, we've exported, I think, about 267 million kilos of beef to the US, which has been really, really, really important to them, and we keep saying they won't do well without us. The US has 11.2 million cattle in feedlots. If they kept those cattle on feed for 28 days longer, that would equal the total of Australia's exports to the US. Now, the fact that it might be a different mixed product, the fact is they are not short of beef. They're actually short of the beef that we sell them, because that's the advantage of scale. You only need 28 days extra on feed for the 11 million cattle on feed that equals our total exports. Coming back to cost, competitive. Outside of Brazil, we're all on about the same price. The US about $4 a kilo, Europe $4 a kilo live, Australia $4 a kilo live, Argentina, Uruguay, we're all $3.80 to $4 live. Brazil is about $3.30 a kilo for their producers. But equally importantly, abattoir labour, just general labour in Brazil, $3.62 an hour US. US, $7.16 an hour US. Australia, $16.21 an hour US. So if we say the animal's the same cost, the cost of conversion with those labour rates, and US is 8 cents, 7.9 cents a kilowatt hour for power, we're 24. So we actually can't compete on a like-for-like basis. So we've got to have something special, which is we've got to have the integrity, got to have the system, got to have the sizzle, because we can't match it in price, or we won't be able to lead the lifestyles that we lead. So it's very much driven by supply demand. China, which has been an unbelievable saviour for everybody, the Chinese market for Brazilian exporters at the moment is they are better off supplying into the US paying a 26% tariff than they are supplying China. So that's China demand has actually, they haven't come out of COVID properly at all. But while the US herd, which I think others, as I say, I've got experts in the room that I'd ring to ask the answers to this question, it's probably 18 months away from reaching back to where it came off from at the start of the drought. We're going to go up a little bit, but global consumption's still going to improve. So I can't see, Ben, a collapse. I'm talking about meat market now. I can't control how farmers behave in the paddock, and the demand will be there, and I don't think there'll be an overproduction coming. So I think in balance, hold on where you can. Just be least cost, be efficient, and efficiency. Sorry, I know it comes back to people ask. We nearly all lie about our calving rates, or what we call in the north our branding rates, right? Everybody has 100% lambing or 100% whatever else. But all I know is in the north we don't. We probably sit there with, for every 100 cows we get about 72 calves. If we're lucky, further out might be 66. That's asking me to run my factory where I pay full labour, full lights, full power, full rates, full insurance, and only run it 66% of the time. So if you can increase the efficiency on your farm and put an extra 30 calves on the ground or weaning for for your cows, the profitability of this business will go through the roof. Coming down to the other thing that's going to be significant change, that this is the only forecasting bit, sorry Ben, is beef on dairy. Now, what's beef on dairy? There's been a significant shift whereby the bobby calf market that's traditionally been the outlet for most calves from dairy cows has come under significant consumer pressure, people eyes and watching. So what producers are now starting is those cows are now being joined to beef bulls. So you've now got an F1 dairy beef. Absolutely nothing wrong with them. 23% of the cattle on feed in the US have dairy genetics in them. So that is potentially a new $1 million growing cattle that are actually going to come into the Australian scene over the next 2 to 3 years. So I think that's probably the biggest shift that's coming. And you asked in your before nearly about capacity to kill. That's probably going to stretch it if we get to 30 million cattle and we start to push for 10 or 11 million turn off. We then may have capacity challenges.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks, Footy. Connor Fitzgerald from FMG here. Just keen for your insights on Australia's weekly processing capacity. This year we've we've touched 140 plus, 145 I think we maxed out at. In years gone past, as you know, we're capable of processing much more than that. During 14-15 it got to 170, 180,000 head a week. Do you sort of see 140-ish is the new normal for Australian meat processing, or is there, during COVID, for example, it was decimated and it seems we're taking a while to climb off the canvas from a processing perspective. Is that just kind of your insights on going forward on our sort of weekly slaughter numbers, I guess? Yeah.
Connor, I think it's only now that I'm sensing across the areas I operate that we're actually back to 0 vacancies in our staff outside of normal turnover. So we actually haven't, in the main, the big end of town, as JBS did more, they haven't been running a 3,200 a week shift on that second shift now since 2019. So because we simply haven't got the staff. We haven't got the skilled staff, and the Pacific labour schemes, that's really good, but they're not slaughtermen and boners. They're not trained or qualified. They're great on the forklifts, great lumping boxes of beef around, fabulous out in the project. So it's actually going to come down to, it's a skill set requirement with the surety cattle that will actually drive those factories ramping back up their second shift. Because we'd all like to do it because it fractionalises your overheads to get through. But we're only just now seeing where we actually got 100% of our people turning up to work. So I don't see it going up until the big end of town start running their second shifts fully.
Scott Bouvier from KWM. Following on from that question really is just what do we need to do to build up the skills and the rural workforce? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'm as guilty as probably everybody else in this room because we all seem to want somebody else to breed our future staff on farm. I mean, me, proud as punch. Daughter's a doctor, son's a lawyer. But I didn't leave a farmer at home. Somebody else had to breed it for me. So what we've got to turn our industry in is, we are a food and fibre industry. We don't want to breed farmers. And our industry, well, there's 36 professional technical degrees available in ag. But we just talk about we're the farmers. No other industry can go from the genetics through to the final nutritionist test. How meat works now. We've got robotics, we've got scanning, we've got x-rays. The skill set requires across our ag, we don't. So we've got to make our industry that is attractive to people who don't want to leave the bush and come and work in law firms or come and work in advisory firms or come and work in banks. We want to show them that there actually is a career, not a farmer, but there's a proud career to stay in the bush, because you're not going to upskill. Well, PLS is, whilst it's fantastic, 3 years intensive training, they have to go home the day after. They're not allowed to be here for longer than 3 years. So you've got to start again. You've got a whole green crew every 3 years. So that's not the investment in the future. That's really just the temporary system. So I think, we need to have not a better immigration policy, but bringing people in that you actually can train and stay. But at our level, we should be really trying to get our kids to want to come into it, to be the scientist, to be the nutritionist, to be the accountant, etc. Sort of an answer, I'm sorry, but it's no, it's not. Nothing's easy, and no matter what industry I'm in, I'm in the aquaculture industry in South Australia, and Coffin Bay, not a bad oyster. Cleaned up Sydney Fine Food Show, so that's okay. But the difference is, I've got blokes there that got to stand in the water, dodging the tide, in the middle of winter in the Great Australian Bight. It's not, it's not really good for succession planning,
I think we've got time for one more question.
Thanks, George. Great to see another fellow Brisbane Lions supporter celebrating a great victory early last month. You spoke about the 2%, Robert Hardy from NBN, you spoke about the 2% of people who show up at MLA, and so if you don't show up, you get what the outcome is. What do you see as the greatest challenges facing Australian producers from that representative perspective, given your roles on Cattle Australia and others? How do you get growers to show up and take an interest in the industry that they're so critically part of?
A bit single-minded, but the biggest challenge is we have 267 agricultural advocacy bodies in Australia. So that is the biggest problem. You cannot expect to command policy development or make change when you're fractionalised to that level. 27 horticultural bodies. Almost, custard apples have their own body. Nothing wrong with a custard apple, but you've got a CEO, an executive, a board. So how do you walk up the steps and think you're going to command influence in Canberra, if that's where you want, when they know there's could be 15 other like bodies coming tomorrow will have a different point of view? So it's a challenge. Cattle Australia, not the soapbox bit. Cattle Australia, though, is actually a representative of industry maturity, where 5 of our 7 states voted to disband the state farmer organised peak council, which was Cattle Australia, Cattle Council of Australia, to turn it into now a democratically elected body. So you suffer the cuts of, there's 7 representatives across Australia, to which nationally, and to deal with national issues. And the change, I think, is narrow your focus of what you can make change on. Federally, you can influence maybe labour, biosecurity, market access and levies. Don't try and take on anything else. Don't try and cure the common cold or fix railway crossings or potholes. Leave that to the other levels. But the biggest thing is the united voice. We just got to bring it tighter together and wield some clout. Wield the process. I hope that's answered in some way.